He is the national columnist. Is that like the Ohio State University, the national columnist for Yahoo Sports? He is Dan Wetzel back here in the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Dan?
That's right. Get it right.
The national columnist for Yahoo Sports. All right, just throw it right out to you. What's the alliance? I know the alliance is historic. I saw the graphic that came with the press release on Tuesday. What in the world? What is this about, Dan Wetzel?
Well, if you want to know why it's not, you shouldn't take it too serious, is because the three logos of the leagues, there was no corporate sponsor.
Historic alliance brought to you by for all the Tostitos, baby.
The Tostitos alliance, the FedEx alliance. Like the fact college sports didn't slap a sponsor on that tells you this is just nothing.
For all the Tostitos, baby.
There he is. There's Brent.
It does not matter. They didn't make a buck on it. There's no signed contract. Now, look, it's these leagues trying to say we still matter, which they do. And it's a full pushback on the SEC and saying we're going to align and make sure you don't run us over and hopefully you don't take any more of our teams. And their number one goal is to make sure that when the bidding for the college football playoff comes out in whether it's 2 years or in 5, unfortunately they delay this thing, that it is not the sole property of ESPN, that ESPN doesn't get to broadcast all of the college football playoff games. They want Fox to be involved. They want someone else to be involved, the way the NFL playoffs are shown on all the networks. And that's because the SEC and ESPN are now exclusively ESPN is the exclusive broadcaster of the SEC. The Big Ten, the Pac-12 particularly, want Fox to be able to profit off the big-time games that the college football playoff will create and then have that kind of profit to later put back into their contract deal. So that's the number one tangible goal of this, is to hit the brakes on the playoff and make sure instead of it going exclusively to ESPN that you have multiple bidders. Everything else is a little bit nebulous. Possibly the scheduling alliance could be a big deal in like 10 years. But that's the number one first start thing, is don't let ESPN get all the money and then keep giving it all to the SEC.
Because the way this is going, Dan, is creating your own league, creating your own super league, creating your own NCAA, with Mark Emmert basically kneecapped by Brett Kavanaugh at the Supreme Court level, and COVID wiping out so many budgets across collegiate sports that there's a gold rush on trying to find out where you can get the money back and how you can grow your pot, certainly to continue on to, try and operate in the black and pay for Title IX sports and things like nature. I mean, this is what is happening right now. And you're saying that the Big Ten, Pac-12, and ACC totally understand they don't want the SEC picking off more people. But are you saying that they believe that ESPN is like a stalking horse, a television stalking horse, to be a partner for this new NCAA that is being formed in the southeast part of the United States? Is that what you're saying, Dan Wetzel?
Some of the more conspiracy-minded ones might think that or be suspicious of that. They all also do business with ESPN,
sure,
though.
Right.
I think it's more that, look, the money in college sports is obviously in TV. You have, and as big as the NCAA basketball tournament is, this college football playoff will dwarf that in money. But in college football, you only get so many games a year that get the big number, the 10 million plus, the 8 million plus. And like during a normal season, you might have one regular season game get over 10 million viewers, maybe two. Ohio State, Michigan almost always does. The SEC championship game, when LSU's playing Alabama, or last year there was a Clemson Notre Dame game in South Bend Saturday night. But those games are rare. But when the playoff comes and all of a sudden you have 7 games that will do that kind of number, you've now created, twice as many, or really 3 times as many at that point. If you're counting on 2 or 3 big games, you now have 10 you don't want ESPN having all of that and then being focused on what do we do with the SEC. You have to have Fox have some money because as these contracts go on, so it's kind of a long play. It's also better for the sport to be on more networks. And the NFL does it right. The NFL doesn't just get bigger ratings in college football. It also gets more dollars per eyeball than them. And they have all 4 networks fighting against each other to try to promote the sport. They get it all over the place. So to move it around makes a lot of sense. They just don't want ESPN to have so much power over the sport because if you control the college football playoff, you have almost all of the big-time television events in college sports. We'll see what happens with CBS and the basketball tournament. That's just a secondary kind of side thing. So they want that spread out, and this is a way of saying we're going to pump the brakes. Now, that's disappointing for fans who are like, hey, we got to go through 2 more seasons at 4. Do we now have to go through 5? I mean, it's kind of like you pulled the rug out from under us. But that's the primary goal. And so it's not – I don't think it's fair to say ESPN is just trying to wipe these other guys out because they need the other teams too. The SEC is a big deal, but it'll never get the national attention, the national rating, unless everyone's involved. We've seen that when it's SEC teams in the championship game, the ratings are lower. You need a Midwest presence or a West Coast presence or something like that to get the bigger areas of the country to tune in.
I love this real talk right here with Dan Wetzel, national columnist of Yahoo Sports, because let's keep talking real here, Dan, because, eventually everyone's going to come together. I mean, let's be honest. This is leverage to make sure that whatever final deal finally gets together for these Power 5 conferences or Power 4, if the Big 12 is now left picking up pieces and is not even part of this, that this is all leverage for down the road. As for right now, was there a danger of Clemson and Ohio State peeling off and joining the SEC along with Oklahoma and Texas? Was that part of maybe this conversation that got the ACC and the Big 12, the Pac-12 and the Big 10 together? Have you heard anything like that at all?
There wasn't any, but if you look at the game pieces and you look ahead, you could see where there might be, not necessarily with Ohio State. The Big Ten is really solid, and Ohio State, and to say Ohio State and Michigan join the SEC makes just wouldn't make sense institutionally for those schools. Football's a big deal, but the Big Ten has a $10 billion a year joint fund to do research and scientific development and all of that. And I know we can all roll our eyes about the academics, but that matters on these campuses. We're talking $10 billion. So, and if you're Ohio State, which has done a tremendous job at improving its academics the last 20 years, you're recruiting your student body from Chicago and from Pennsylvania and Michigan. Like, to just go play in the South wouldn't make a lot of sense. They're not going to give up everything for football. And Michigan's certainly not going to do it. So those things matter more on the campus. A $100 million football team is a big deal, but it's not as big as a $10 billion, having access to $10 billion in, driverless car funding and things like that they're working on at these schools. So all of that goes on. Now, if you look at the long term and you say Clemson and Florida State, right, geographically, culturally, academically, competitively, financially, it makes a ton of sense for those two to join the SEC, right? They're right in. They're already they're right there. It's a much easier move for Clemson and Florida State than it would be for Oklahoma and Texas. Now, there was no movement on Clemson and Florida State right now. But if you're the Big Ten, let's say you're the Big Ten, and you're looking, because people are like, why is the Big Ten doing this? They're as strong as the SEC. Their TV money is just as big. They may not win the championship, but their programs are strong. There's a whole bunch of 100,000-seat stadiums that get filled every week. They're fine. Why would you kind of lend your strength to prop up these other leagues? It's because they want Clemson, they want Clemson and Florida State to feel good. And if you're in the Big Ten, you're looking and saying, well, I could see these two jumping. Why don't we try to help out the ACC a little bit and make it worth their while to stay? Because the one thing Clemson and Florida State have, this is what Oklahoma and Texas gave up, and they may regret it forever, because Nebraska sure does. When you go to a harder league, you can't just roll out of bed and go, we're going 10-2 at least this year. if we've got our program together or we've got an inside track on the playoff, you now have to fight through a much tougher league. And so there's still a lot of reasons for Clemson and Florida State to stay right where they are. But certainly you could look at that and go, boy, that's not some seismic move if you said, hey, I'm going to join these leagues. The leagues already are in your footprint.
Dan Wetzel here on the Rich Eisen Show. My oldest son, Dan, is getting bar mitzvahed this very weekend.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Let's flash forward to when he gets out of college. What does this scene look like? What does it look like when he gets out of college?
Deal?
Yeah, everything. What does the landscape look like, do you think? Crystal ball.
You have 4 major conferences.
Okay.
Look, if this deal goes forward, and they haven't worked out all the scheduling, but the plan they have for scheduling that they're trying to figure out is to have each school play. If you're North Carolina, you will also play one team from the Big Ten, one team from the Pac-12 every year. If you're Michigan, you play an ACC and a Pac-12 team every year. And you would basically now start playing 10 conference games, and that's what you would do. So it takes a long time to get to that because they have these schedules planned out 5-6 years in advance, and no one wants to break contracts and all of that. But I would say if this thing holds, and it could, it's because that's a good scheduling deal for these leagues. You'd be playing more high quality games, which I think fans would actually like. About 10 games a year. The SEC would probably have to play 10 games amongst them itself because they would be starved out of a lot of non-conference games. Other than the real rivalry games that would stay, Georgia Tech, Georgia, Florida State, Florida, Louisville and Kentucky, and Clemson and South Carolina. And Alabama would say, well, who are we going to play? The Big Ten won't play us, the Pac-12 won't play us, the ACC won't play us. You basically got Notre Dame and a couple others. So they might have to go to 10 teams. I actually think you'll have more good games, more big television games, and all of that. But you'll basically have 4 leagues. The Big 12 teams will step back some and be that upstart. The remaining Big 12 teams, and I think you'll have a 12-team playoff. So it's not like this is gonna significantly alter what's going on. They're just trying whatever they can. And now here's the other part. This is a handshake agreement in college sports, mind you. College sports. If your son, let's put it this way, if your son becomes a cross-country runner,
yes, sir,
that could go to the local college, they will make him sign a binding letter of intent because they do not trust him to leave them, right? They will have all sorts of documents you have to sign. If you're the lowest athlete in the entire athletic department, yet we're to believe that 41 schools just are going to work this together as a gentleman's agreement. So this is more likely blows up than not. But if it goes, I mean, there are a whole lot of options for these leagues. And so I think you'll have a 4 major leagues, 12-team playoff. It'll be fine. No matter how much they mismanage this thing, college football and to a lesser degree college basketball is so good, it can't be screwed up.
See, here's what I think it is, Dan, and you tell me how far off I am. You could rate it on 1 to 10 about how accurate this might actually be. I think Greg Sankey, who's been on this show a couple times, the SEC commissioner, is a really smart fella. I think he is really smart, really savvy, and terrific at his job. I think he sees what's going on with Mark Emmert. I think he sees what's going on with the NIL, name, image, and likeness. I think he sees what's going on with the Supreme Court. The writing is on the wall. It is in neon letters that it's open for business. Oklahoma and Texas is now in Greg Sankey's fold. He is trying to, maybe with, as you pointed out at the beginning of this conversation, with my former place of business, the worldwide leader in sports, ready to roll with an idea that he winds up running the entire athletic world and that everybody gets together at some point. Certainly if the leverage that you just said that this historic alliance might have by saying, okay, enjoy. I know it just means more to y'all down there in the southeast part of the United States and the Gulf South, but guess what? Enjoy, keep playing each other. That whole USC, Alabama kickoff and Jerry World, see ya. That ain't happening. So at some point, there might be some leverage point from the historic alliance, and everyone comes together. And not only do they have a huge consortium of schools and academia that Sankey's in charge of, and that ESPN essentially mostly televises, But on top of it, they've got themselves an NCAA basketball tournament to run and turn the current bracket into the NIT. And they run the entire world collegiately. That's the way I'm sort of seeing this. Maybe I'm jaded, but this is the way I'm viewing it, Dan. Your thoughts?
Well, they would need all the leagues to come together because they can't get the TV number they need.
Yes.
Especially if college football fans elsewhere take a opposition stance. We know how our country is now. Everyone's it's not just rooting for your team; it's hating the other team. And people don't watch the SEC out of some kind of pride, and those are your hardest core fans, the most reliable TV viewers. So they have to, and they just don't have the population centers as much as they've expanded to Texas. And in the Northeast, it's still fledgling ratings. In the Northeast, fledgling ratings out in California. Well, you still need those to have big numbers.
Yes.
The problem with the basketball tournament is very profitable, but that basketball tournament succeeds because it's a brilliantly set up. The construct is perfect. The first weekend is about the upsets.
Yes, it is.
And the Cinderellas. That's what draws people in.
You could still have them, is what I'm saying. You could still have them. They'll
take any scrap you get. Yes,
you can still have them.
They'll take any. Abilene Christian will show up if you invite them. Yeah. And you have to have that. Can you replace the NCAA? You can, but you kind of, at this point, the NCAA is completely neutered.
That's what I'm saying. Sankey sees a void. He sees a void, and it's going to take some time, but there's a world to dominate, and the first dominoes were Texas and Oklahoma. So that's the way I'm kind of viewing it. But
the NCAA is fairly harmless at this point. They don't really take much money from anybody. They give it all back to the schools. And you still need someone to run the tournament, and you still need somebody to keep the trains running on time. And with name, image, and likeness, there's no more enforcement because it's impossible to decipher. It would take 1,000 forensic accountants to figure out whether a booster actually gave money because he wanted. The money's there.
Yes.
So there really isn't a whole lot the NCAA is going to do in the future that's going to anger anybody. It's really just it's not even that big of a building in Indianapolis. There's a few hundred people working in there doing a lot of what they do is very well done, right? The basketball tournaments generally run well, but you got to have somebody running your field hockey tournament, all those things. So I'm always skeptical of replacing the NCAA because it's like you have to then create another NCAA. At this point, the NCAA has almost no power. You're sharing scraps with Division III schools and things like that.
This is why I'm saying
no question this consolidates power, and Greg Sankey is playing chess, and they're all looking long-term. That's why everyone was like, well, this announcement is stupid. Nothing changed today. It's like, that's not what this is about. It's a long-term plan to try to support the other long-term plan, but nobody's quite sure what their plans are.
So my theory is more closer to possible rather than tinfoil hat, right?
It's definitely possible. 100%. I just don't know how you do it.
There's time.
But there's no tinfoil hats anymore, man. Anything's possible.
Well, tinfoil hat brought to you by Reynolds Wrap.
There you go. Then I will take a college. We just had we basically had a 41-team conference get created. There's only 32 teams in the whole NFL.
Thanks.
So, there are no tinfoils anymore. Everything's possible. It's just like, where is this going to land? The problem you have, no one is in charge of this sport. Nobody. You go show up and say, who's in charge? And they point to 10 different guys. Well,
I would say Greg Sankey's in charge. He's
probably in charge, yeah.
That's what I'm saying right now. Thanks for the call, Dan Wetzel. Let's chat down the line during the season. Enjoy your time that you have between now and kickoff. Thanks.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
National columnist of Yahoo Sports, Dan Wetzel on the Rich Eisen Show. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.